In 1907, a young Austrian man stood outside the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, clutching his rejection letter. He'd failed the entrance exam twice. His dream of becoming an artist was over. His name was Adolf Hitler. And within 26 years, this rejected art student would become the dictator of Germany and architect of history's most horrific genocide. But how? How does someone go from sleeping in homeless shelters to commanding an entire nation? The answer isn't simple, and it's more disturbing than you might think. Today, we're examining the transformation of Adolf Hitler, not to glorify or excuse his crimes, but to understand how one of history's greatest monsters was made. Because the lessons from his rise are warnings we can't afford to ignore. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, Austria. His childhood was marked by a domineering, abusive father and a doting mother who died when Hitler was 18. That loss devastated him. With no real direction, Hitler moved to Vienna in 1907, convinced he'd become a great artist. Reality had other plans. He failed the art school entrance exam because his technical skills were good, but his work lacked humanity. The academy told him his figures were lifeless. They suggested he try architecture instead. But Hitler was too proud to pivot. He refused to go back to school for the required diploma. Instead, he spiraled. From 1908 to 1913, Hitler lived in Vienna, scraping by selling postcards and paintings. He stayed in flophouses. He was bitter, lonely, and increasingly angry at the world. This is where the poison entered his mind. Vienna at this time was a hotbed of anti-Semitism and racial pseudoscience. The city's mayor, Karl Lueger, openly blamed Jews for society's problems. Newspapers and pamphlets spread conspiracy theories about Jewish conspiracies to control finance and media. Hitler absorbed all of it. He spent his days in libraries reading nationalist literature and social Darwinist theories that claimed some races were superior to others. He became convinced that Germans were being polluted by other ethnicities, particularly Jews. This wasn't an original idea. He was simply adopting the prejudices already swirling around him. Think about this. Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. He found it ready-made, culturally acceptable in certain circles, and adopted it as his worldview. Vienna didn't create a monster from nothing. It gave an angry, alienated young man a target for his rage. In 1913, Hitler moved to Munich, Germany. When World War I broke out in 1914, he volunteered immediately for the German army. For the first time in his life, Hitler found belonging. He served as a messenger, running communications between units, dangerous work. He was wounded twice and received the Iron Cross for bravery. By all accounts, he was a dedicated, if odd, soldier. He didn't drink, smoke, or joke with the other men. He talked endlessly about politics and Germany's destiny. The war gave Hitler three things: purpose, structure, and a sense of superiority. He finally felt part of something greater than himself. Then, Germany lost. Hitler was in a military hospital, temporarily blinded by a gas attack when he learned Germany had surrendered in November 1918. He was utterly shattered. He later wrote that he wept for the first time since his mother's death. But Hitler didn't accept that Germany had simply been defeated. Instead, he embraced the stab-in-the-back myth, the conspiracy theory that Germany's army hadn't lost on the battlefield but had been betrayed by Jews, communists, and weak politicians at home. This delusion became the foundation of everything that followed. Hitler convinced himself that Germany had been stabbed in the back, and he would be the one to avenge it.
After the war, Hitler stayed in the army, working in intelligence, monitoring political groups. In 1919, he was sent to observe a tiny nationalist group called the German Workers' Party. Instead of just observing, Hitler spoke up at a meeting, and the party leaders were impressed. They asked him to join. Within 2 years, Hitler had taken control, renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, and discovered his greatest talent: public speaking. Hitler was a mesmerizing orator. He tapped into people's fears, resentments, and humiliations. Germany in the 1920s was crushed by the Treaty of Versailles, drowning in debt and suffering hyperinflation. People needed someone to blame. Hitler gave them scapegoats: Jews, communists, foreign powers. He promised to restore Germany's greatness. He didn't offer complex policy solutions. He offered emotion, identity, and revenge. And it worked. By 1923, Hitler felt ready to seize power. In November, he attempted a coup in Munich, the beer hall putsch. It failed spectacularly. Hitler was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Most people would have given up. Hitler doubled down. In prison, he wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle, laying out his entire ideology: German racial superiority, the need for living space, and his plans to eliminate Jewish people. The book was part autobiography, part manifesto, and it openly telegraphed his genocidal intentions. He served only 9 months, and when he got out, he changed tactics. He had learned that violence alone wouldn't work. He needed to take power legally. The Nazi Party remained relatively small throughout the 1920s. But then, in 1929, the Great Depression hit. The German economy collapsed. Unemployment soared. Democracy seemed to be failing. In desperation, people turned to extremes. The Nazis and the Communists both surged in elections. Traditional conservative politicians, terrified of communism, decided Hitler was the lesser evil. They thought they could control him. They couldn't have been more wrong. In January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany through backroom political deals. He hadn't won a majority, but he was in power. Within weeks, the Reichstag building burned down. Hitler blamed communists and convinced the government to pass the Reichstag Fire Decree, suspending civil liberties. Then came the Enabling Act, which gave Hitler dictatorial powers. By August 1934, when President Hindenburg died, Hitler merged the positions of Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer, absolute leader. Democracy was dead. The transformation was complete. So, how did Hitler become Hitler? It wasn't one thing. It was a perfect storm. Personal failure and resentment, exposure to existing prejudices and conspiracy theories, the trauma and humiliation of Germany's World War I defeat, economic catastrophe that made people desperate, a democratic system that underestimated the threat, conservative elites who thought they could use him, and Hitler's own dark charisma and absolute conviction. He didn't rise alone. He was enabled, empowered, and elevated by people who should have stopped him. Hitler's rise teaches us that monsters aren't born fully formed. They're shaped by circumstances, choices, and the complicity of those around them. Hitler found hatred already waiting for him in Vienna. He found nationalist resentment after World War I. He found desperate people during the Depression. But he also found enablers, people who gave him platforms, funding, and political power because they thought they could control extremism for their own benefit. The most chilling lesson? It happened in Germany, one of the most educated, culturally advanced nations on earth. Democracy didn't protect them. Neither did intelligence or sophistication. What protected people was vigilance. And by the time enough Germans recognized the threat, it was too late. Understanding how Hitler became Hitler isn't about excusing him. It's about recognizing the warning signs when they appear again. Because they always do, in different forms, in different times. The question is, will we recognize them?